Hi guys, my name is Kyle Alvarez. I directed the film C.O.G. that you just watched. Thank you so much, first of all, for taking the time to watch the film. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for sticking around to hear some answers to some of your questions. So I've got them pulled up here. In sake of time, I'm going to go through them a little quickly because we've got a lot of questions, but hopefully I can answer each and every one of them. The first one comes from Kelly W. She said that she read that I edit my films under the pseudonym Fernando Collins. What's up with that? For me, I've always been my own editor. I'm an editor by trade. That's kind of been a day job for me as I've tried to survive in Los Angeles. And I feel like there's a stigma against writer-directors who also edit their films. And for me, it's always been a cost-saving measure to edit my own films more than even a creative one, because there just hasn't been the time or money to hire another crew member. And so it comes down to, do we get an extra day to shoot, or are you going to edit the film yourself, or are you going to hire an editor? And I always want more days. So that's why, but at the same time, I just don't consider it a part of my ongoing identity as a filmmaker, but I also feel that kind of changing. Editing C.O.G. was a much easier experience for me than editing my first film, Easier with Practice, and so I'm liking it. It's kind of becoming part of my process, so maybe that'll change along the way. But for now, I like to keep it sort of anonymous. But at the same time, I'm happy to talk about it too. This question came from Jeanne and Stephen French, and the question was, what would be your advice on putting films in festivals? It can be a big challenge. I was really lucky on this film to get the support of Sundance, and then that opens up a lot of doors, both to distributors, audiences, other festivals. But, my first film didn't get into Sundance. It didn't get into any of the major festivals we submitted it to. It took a really long time. And eventually there was those programmers out there that saw the film and helped place it into some good festivals. And, the film went on to get a successful release and helped me out a lot to get the next film going. So, it's tough. It just takes tenacity. It takes pushing through, knowing you're going to get rejections. It's really, really hard. Once you've made a film and you've got some establishments, but, the biggest advice I can give is take your time. Apply to the big festivals first. Be prepared for it to take some time, especially if it's your first film. If you have any kind of connections to anyone or film festivals, follow through. Don't hesitate to say, hey, I just want to make sure, you can never politicize your way into getting your movie into a festival, but you can just make sure it gets seen and that people are aware how much you want to be a part of the festival. So if you do have connections, follow through. But make sure that the big ones want your premiere. So be careful. Hold on to your film. Don't start screening it until you know for sure it's the right festival you want to have your premiere at. This question comes from Kevin. How difficult was it to approach a Sedaris short story with the intent of turning it into a full-length screenplay? And what were some of the stylistic challenges that occurred as a result of directing versus his writing? A few people ask questions that my answer will encompass here, but I'll get to those later. But first of all, approaching him was really difficult. He'd never said yes to a film before, and so just trying to get through to him, because his reps were rightfully so saying, well, this is just not part of his process as a writer. He's not interested in a film getting made. I felt my approach was different, which was to say I really liked this specific story, and I wasn't even really going to make it a David Sedaris movie. I was going to try to make a film that felt like it came as much from me as it did his story, and not try to steal his identity or his voice or even his jokes directly, and really just try to make a film that I felt spoke to the truth of his story that I really loved. And so once I basically had to go to a book signing of his after 2 years of trying to reach him, and I gave him a copy of Easier with Practice and just said, if you like the film, I'd love to talk to you about some ideas. And I was grateful that he watched it and that he did like it, and I had an opportunity to sort of go in there and be like, this is going to be different. This is going to be a small, low-budget, independent film, and you're not even really going to recognize yourself in it. Maybe you will, but the process of it's going to be of me making my own film that just happens to be based on one of your stories. And I think that I'm grateful that that idea spoke to him. So it's stylistically, I'll get into that in a little bit, but the hardest part of any adaptation is it needs to be a film first and foremost. So you have to make painful decisions. You always want to try to stay true to the spirit of what you loved about the story. But at the same time, when the lights go down and an audience is sitting there watching a movie, maybe some are going to be like, well, that didn't happen or that happened, but you can only make a film for yourself and for the majority of audiences. And so for me, it was just the process of knowing I would lose some of the great jokes because I didn't want to have narration. It didn't feel like that would be true to the kind of character and story I was trying to tell. So I could talk about this forever, but I'll actually this will stream into the next question, which is from Patrick, where he asked how David is obviously a very autobiographical writer, and how autobiographical is this film for me? Um, I wouldn't necessarily call it autobiographical. I'm very different than the character, but I struggled with a lot of the same things. I struggled with not so much sexual identity as I did, and I think the film tackles less on sexual identity and more on community. And I grew up in a very religious neighborhood, but not being a very religious person, and I always felt this sort of sense of displacement. How do I fit into this world? How do I fit into my community? What community am I a part of? Am I a part of the gay community? I don't know. I never really felt that, and that kind of angst is what's autobiographical in the film for me, and what I loved about this story when I first read it 15 years ago in the first place. Okay, the next question is from Benjamin. Said that he read in a Vulture interview that I mentioned I had just met David. And what role did David play in the creative process? Actually, I've known David for a while now. He first agreed to let me have the rights to this about 2.5 years ago. And so I've spent that time, spending time with him, always emailing him questions. Part of David's feeling was that I was sort of pitching, okay, I'm going to go make my own film. And so his approach was, well, good, you should go make your own film. So he was always there as a resource, but he actually didn't want to. He actually didn't want to have an influence on the story. I think he wanted me to just go do my own thing. And, I had to take that very heavily and be like, you know what, I need to make my own film and not be thinking, well, what would David do or what would make David happy? In fact, what the best way to make him happy would be that I made a film I was happy with. And that was a really hard place to reach, and took me a long time to feel that level of comfortability of making the film and knowing that it primarily had to satisfy me beyond even David or anyone else. But yes, I had known him for a long time. So maybe I was misquoted in the Vulture piece, but at Sundance was the first time he saw the film, which was nerve-wracking to say the least, to have your film premiere to an audience like that, at a festival like that, but to also have someone you admire and feel you owe a lot to in the audience was very stressful, to say the least. The next question is from Skylar, I believe it's how it's pronounced. It's Schulyer, and the question is what are what's the major differences between writing and directing? Is there a fluid recognition between both jobs, and what's the load like to balance them? For me, they're kind of the same thing. You also being an editor, throwing that into that, it's all part of the same process for me. You write and you're wearing your writer's hat. You direct, you wear the director's hat. And when you edit, you wear the editor's hat. That's always the priority. But the best moments you experience on set or making the film are when those overlap the most. When you're on set and you come up with a line as a writer and you come up with it on the spot, you change it as a director, and then you figure out, you start working on the scene on your lunch break and pull it all together. So for me, the best moments I have as a director, or as a filmmaker, I should say, is when those three roles really intertwine. So no, I don't see it as extra workload, because it's sort of, for me, has always just been the process of telling the story. But I look forward to breaking those apart. I look forward to working with a writer, and I look forward to working with an editor. But even still, I think I would have to involve myself somehow in each process to really feel like the film came from me. Okay, the next question, we're getting through there. Thank you guys for sticking around. Is from Andy. What are your cinematic influences? What do you watch over and over again, and what's shaped your work? What are you currently watching? Well, my favorite film of all time is Vertigo, as you could probably see over this shoulder right here. There's a Vertigo print there over my piano, but I've seen that film more than I've seen anything else. But so far, that hasn't been an immediate influence on my films. This C.O.G. in particular was influenced by sort of the mid-90s sensibility of comedy. When Alexandra Payne first started and made Citizen Ruth, there was this sort of ideology that dark comedy wouldn't be... Nowadays we associate dark comedy with like accidental crime pictures or sort of like slapsticky murder movies, but for me dark comedy has always been something that felt really truthful, a movie that prioritized a dramatic intention, even in the face of comedy. And I felt Alexandra Payne did that really well in both Election and Citizen Ruth. And so I thought about those movies a lot. I thought about Chuck and Buck, Mike White's first film, a lot. Those movies definitely influenced this film. In terms of what I'm watching now, this year my favorite film was probably Blue is the Warmest Color. I'm not sure if it's playing there yet or not, but I was very, very moved by that movie. It affected me a lot. And I loved The Hunt, which was this great Mads Mikkelsen film that he started that I think is on DVD now. That's absolutely worth checking out. Mike, who's a big Dean Stockwell fan, asked how I came about casting him. When I'd written this character of Hobbs, the farm owner, when I was writing him in the script, I was thinking, oh, who is this great veteran character actor? Someone that you recognize but don't immediately place. And, there's a lot of great veteran actors out there, but for me, Dean encapsulated that. Like, I would just dream of working with him. You can think of all these incredible performances he's had since he was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. So we sent him the script through his agent, and fortunately he hadn't done a film in a while and was interested in doing it, and the script made him laugh, and he came out there. But I was really nervous to direct an Academy Award nominee. It wasn't something that, but I realized, in fact, that the best way to work with an experienced actor like that is to treat them like anybody else. They want to be directed and they want to be led as much as any other actor is going to be. And so I had a great experience working with him, and it was surreal. I still kind of look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I made a movie with Dean Stockwell. It's a thrill for me, and he was lovely and great to work with. From Julie, describe your path over the past 9 years. How did you get from film school to writer director? I'll give the short version of this. I went to film school in Miami, and then I moved to Los Angeles right after I graduated, and I did a bunch of oddball jobs when I first moved to LA, and I spent about a year working for Warren Beatty, actually, and was a production assistant at a bunch of companies, and nothing was really leading towards making my first film. So really the path was not steady incline. It was the path of just going from, well, I'm doing work here in the industry, but not doing what I want to be doing, to, well, I need to make a movie. And it's just a decision. It's as simple as that. It's sitting down and being like, I'm going to make a film. What is it going to be, and how am I going to do it? And granted, that took a lot of time, but once I decided that, then I felt I was on the right path. And it took a long time. It took another 3 years between my first film and my second film just to try to get the financing together. That's always the big enemy, is films, unfortunately, cost money. Even low-budget films still cost a lot of money, and so it's a tough thing to try to get people to convince you to risk their money on you. And so I'm always looking for collaborators that want to trust me and like my films and my point of view, and that can take a lot of time, because you want to make the film the right way. You want to make the film with a financier that is trying to make the same film you are. Julie also, this might be the same Julie or a different Julie. He's never allowed one of his stories to be turned into a film. How did you make this happen? I talked about it a little bit before, so I'll pass on that one just because it was, the process of meeting him and just staying in touch with him. I think anytime you're going to adapt an author's work, it's just about showing them respect, showing them you understand the material, what you want to do with it, being really clear with that, and also acknowledging, you're going to be taking their life and putting it on screen, and, that's a really... I gotta have a lot of respect for that person, because I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable watching a film about myself. So, nor would I don't think nothing exciting enough has happened to me to be making to a film, but it's gotta be a really, really hard thing. I think it takes a lot of humility to trust someone else to do that. So I'm really grateful to both Davey Rothbart, that my first one was based on, and David Sedaris on this film, that they trusted me with that. Steve asked, what's next for me? I'm working on a film now that hopefully will go into production early next year. We're down the line with some cast and some financiers, and it's very different. I didn't write it, actually, so I'm changing up my usual workflow on these things, and it's a great script and a great story, and it's a bigger film, but still a modest film, but it's an ensemble film, so it's very challenging. But I'm also really, really excited about it, and hopefully, within a year, it's something I can share. Jen asked, do I feel obligated to stick to the original narrative when I'm adapting? I answered this a little bit before, but yeah, I think the best thing is of course, you want to stay true to what you love about the story. You want to stay true to the intention and what it is that drew you to that in the first place. If you start veering off too far, you're like, why am I even doing this? Am I doing justice to the story? But at the same time, it still needs to be a film. And that's where you have to make some really, really hard decisions. And it depends. Each thing is different. Do you owe something to history, or do you owe something to the writer? And in this case, I feel like David's work is out there. He's out there. He's still speaking. He's constantly touring. He's got his audiobooks. He's on TV. He's writing. I didn't feel obligated to personify him on screen. I just felt obligated to take this story and actually remove his identity from it some. His individual identity, what he looks like, how he sounds, and that was always, in casting it. I was just trying to find the right person for the script, not necessarily the right person to play David Sedaris, and that's risky. It's scary, and you want to look back and think, okay, did I make the right film? But if you stay true to your intentions, all those changes... if you make them for the right reasons, they're the ones you can always stand behind, I found at least. And then the last question is from Lindy. She asked, what's your opinion on film versus digital as a modern filmmaker? I love film. I would love to get to shoot on film one day, but financially and time wise, it makes no sense at this stage. There's if it's a distinct look you're going for, if you want your film to look like a 60 millimeter film, have a certain grain or quality to it, all the more power. And nowadays, Kodak has great programs to try to get their film stocks out there more to independent filmmakers. But for me, I'm the kind of guy I like running the camera long. I don't like having to cut between takes. I like just resetting and going again. I like not worrying about how many feet I have left to shoot for a day. The great thing about digital is that it provides a lot of tools that would take me longer to get into to an independent filmmaker when it comes to lighting, when it comes to shooting at night, when it comes to post-production, the workflow. There's just so many things. I mean, if I made a pros and cons list, unfortunately, and I say this reluctantly, the pros on film would be, this long, and the pros in digital would be this huge, insurmountable thing in terms of what you get as an independent filmmaker. If I ever get to make a studio film and have that opportunity, maybe I would try to look at shooting film, but nowadays even most studio films are shooting on digital, and sometimes I leave a film being, oh, they definitely shot that on film, and I look up the camera and it wasn't at all. So I think we've crossed the threshold, and I don't want to see film die, but I do also think it'll become more an act of specificity. Like when filmmakers choose to shoot in black and white nowadays, there's a specific reason they're trying to do that. And I think film will be the same way, for better or worse. But for cost-saving measures, that shooting digital is the most important thing. So, okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you guys for sticking around. I hope this was interesting. Thank you for watching the film. If you enjoyed it, tell your friends about it. And thanks for all your support. I really appreciate it.